that would put ESG transformation into operation. So my message for today's event is to give the floor to Yana Krokhmalova. Yes, thank you. Now I would like to share my presentation. Um, Unfortunately, the organizers now have to allow us to. So please let us share the screen. Okay, now I have it. So let's start. I came from Irkutsk yesterday. I attended the conference brief organized by Irkutsk Oil Company, and it was dedicated to ESG. And there are some common issues there. I don't know where I should speak about what is ESG. It is environment, social issues, and governance. But we speak about how the company impacts its social environment and, of course, the corporate governance. Now, this is a very trendy area, but now let's see why is it so popular in Russia and in Russia, because abroad it has been popular and trendy for some 10 years now. All projects are implemented out of the time frame and out of budget, and the reason for that is risks that we still cannot manage efficiently. The same is true about ecology. We have to uh, acknowledge that we have now more catastrophes, but what is more interesting is that the dynamics of technogenic disasters looks pretty much similar to natural disasters. And so there are two options. It's whether nature's reaction to our impacts, or maybe like 100 years ago, we just didn't have enough technologies to collect all this data. So maybe these are just some speculations with the information which is quite common now. Until now, the most serious for all risk managers was Fukushima disaster, which seriously impacted the project management approaches. Then we had COVID-19, which was a shock for the entire world because the world was not ready for that. Although we always believed that the West is more risk oriented and we are lagged. But it turned out that the whole world was not able to manage the risks efficiently. Then what we liked after the COVID is this federal law about biological safety. And now switching to the ESG agenda, I think everybody has seen this picture on United Nations have declared the Sustainable Development Goals. Why is this important? So I would like to start saying that however we treat this concept of ESG, I will speak about the problems later. But still now, this is a hype topic. This is trendy and fashionable. And all investors, if they have a possibility of choosing, they will prefer the companies whose ESG ranking will be high. The ranking situation is still unclear how to, count this ranking about the criteria. We're not talking about CO2 only. For example, the social component, because it is very difficult to somehow estimate it. So we still are not sure about the criteria, but it will be there in our life, and all investors will see how you work with ESG. Everyone should understand what is the strategy of transformation to ESG, and it has to be realized not only but by top management. There are certain trends. I have 10 minutes to speak. We have more colleagues who will speak about it. I wanted to focus on the problems. For example, the project of Northern Sea Route. I have been watching it with great interest. I believe that in spite being very important to Russia and being an image project, but there are a lot of nuances which make it very vulnerable. It is observed by the West, because I compare it with the North Stream and South Stream 2, which are attacked legally. And the same is true for the ecology. If something happens at this project, it will be a huge disaster. Quite recently, we discussed this situation with the risk managers of Rosatom. Of course, they say that everything is under control and everything will be okay. But I think that we should avoid this classical mental catch. Not everything is under control. The pandemic has shown that these black swans, they can occur, and we should treat more seriously the development of the Arctic zone, of the regions and the infrastructure. And they have to be at the highest level using the digital systems, online monitoring of any situation in the Arctic, not only in the ocean, but also on the shore. And there has to be a possibility of a very rapid response to all environmental disasters. For example, even oil spills, they have to be liquidated very rapidly. Just to see on the screen what usually happens, what sorts of threats. But if we speak about the oil, uh, Likhachev has signed a decree that cargo of the large Northern Sea route has to make 150 million tons by 2030, if I'm not mistaken. And you understand that oil is just a small share of what is planned for the Northern Sea route. But if some oil tanker gets struck in some ice and it is damaged and there is an oil spill, then this is a serious problem. You can see the links and references to where I get this information from. So maybe this is not like the final opinion, but still it's a hypothesis. So if it happens, then we are not still able to collect oil from the ice shelf. And this disaster will be seen by the West just in the way it would be profitable for them to see. So they will turn it into a global apocalypse. So this is the situation that happened in the Mexican Gulf, and you can see there was a lot of hype about it. Yes, they say that in the Arctic such explosion is not possible, but still the tanker can break and the oil can spill on the ice. I wanted to show this picture, what is now done by the foreign companies. Some of them oppose the Northern Sea route because they say, and as for the CO2, you saw that in July this year we had like a first sign, and now there is a lot of discussion where we should pay the tax. Our government is trying to take the tax into the Russian budget. We will see what we will have at the end. But still, for the companies that emit CO2, they will be taxed, and it will make many enterprises unprofitable. And we have to keep it in mind, especially when this is a town or town making enterprise, because if it is closed, all people will be unemployed and they will have no money to pay for living. So this is about the social component. Also, I wanted to highlight that we talk not only about this component. In the internet, they say that a company should organize a good social package for their staff and provide them with comfortable working conditions. But still, I think that the laws will be wider. They will touch upon the uh, influence of the social environment of the company itself. For example, Gazprom Media, they say that we are digital, but our content influences the brain and the world outlook of the society. And I think that it will also be weighed and assessed and ranked. As for project management, if I look at why I look at the Northern Sea route, that's because we have had quite a lot of experience in that area in Gazprom. That's why we call upon for everyone to treat ESG agenda seriously. And it's best to start working with it now, not to postpone it and not to hope that Europe, without having an opportunity of getting our gas, will somehow become friendlier to us. No, they will not become friendlier. You remember the South flow. As for weighing the factors, on the example of the risks, I have to say that the probability of different events is identified by two options. It's whether an expert assessment that can be cognitively biased, and not very objective. And then the second is statistics, big data, which has to be implemented. But again, on the example of GISTEC, this is a state information system for the entire fuel complex. They had to report to our big platform where we process and analyze data. I have to say that the data cannot become relevant. It is unreal. It is even unreal to collect the data. And to make any conclusion after working with this data in some algorithms, we need a massive completeness of this data. But you can only collect some 10% of the existing information. As for the big data, yes, it is growing. The platforms are sold. But the problem, as I said, is not about the technologies, but the problem is that it is very difficult to implement them. And organizing the collection of this data is the greatest problem here. All this industrial activity at different industrial facilities, they appear like more real for that. But the companies, they are not very eager to become digitalized. Russia is not very fast here. And if we talk about some social things, then collecting information from the brain is a very difficult thing, uh, including some trackers that allow us to analyze voice, speech, video analytics, audio analytics, and this is all very difficult. And in Russia, it is at a very initial stage. But still, this analytics is in trend now, and it will be developing. And why I bring together ESG trend and risk management, because this all implies efficient risk management. So if we enter this ESG agenda, then we have to do it in a proper way. When in 2018 we had this federal law 209 about risk management, there was not a word about how it should be organized. And everybody was very formal about this arrangement. Some Word, Excel, and paper reports, nothing serious. Because processing this data by hand is just impossible. So now we understand that risk management has to be digitalized, and it has to be an integrated risk management system. It's a global platform. The same is true, we have to understand, the same is true is for the ESG agenda. All these factors will also be calculated with the help of certain criteria. And if you are ahead of the process at your company, and if you digitalize all these calculations, then of course you will prove to foreign investors that you really understand what you do. You have calculated everything and you have everything digitalized. And it will be a very serious competitive advantage for any company.
И вот то, что вы обратили как раз внимание на СМП, назовем так его, на зеленость, да, это вот очень важный ваш вывод, да, потому что я вот всегда смотрю, когда все пишут об СМП, все об этом забывают. И вот это очень важный фактор, да, вот
And it's
сейчас
a really important factor.
мы строим суда на жирном природном газе, на СПГ, да, это экологично.
We are building
Но никто
SDG on
не задумывается о том,
natural
что вообще все
gases,
СПГ
but nobody's thinking about the technology
западными странами, да, Европы, они не
technologies
включены в
of the
список
Western countries.
безопасных зеленых технологий, да.
They are not
Они
included
об этом сейчас, ну,
in safe
немного
environmental
говорили, да, там они считают,
technologies
что
list.
технологии, связанные с атомной энергетикой, они с этой точки зрения зеленые становятся, то СПГ они зеленым не считают, и поэтому
So
то,
they
что
are not
Россия
counted as the safe and ecological
природный газ, это России
technologies.
не поможет.
And it will not help
Например,
our country.
так, правила Посейдона, которые не соблюдаются, да, Россия, то
Like you know, they are not followed the rules like the rule of the Poseidon.
транзит и так далее, то там еще очень много будет на самом деле проблем.
And it will be followed by lots of other problems.
Ну, может быть, да, вот мы с вами редко общаемся, очень раз открыто.
We're talking rarely about it, but if we need to talk about it more.
Давайте мы продолжаем, да, вот у нас просто еще один наш коллега очень спешит.
We will continue. One of our colleagues is in a hurry, but his presentation will be very interesting.
Будет говорить Игорь Каратецкий.
Igor Karatinsky is a partner and
КПМГ в СНГ, да, ну мы все компании КПМГ знаем, поэтому Игорь, пожалуйста.
He's a risk manager at KPMG.
Спасибо. Я сейчас, коллеги, включите меня тоже. Я хочу ввести пару слайдов. Ну, пока слайды...
I want to show you the presentations.
Небольшой все появилось. Исторический экскурс не делается. Меня видно, да, мою презентацию?
Да, видно.
Смотрите, я бы хотел, знаете, начать с рисков.
I would like to start with the risks that were mentioned before. It's really trendy to talk about the risks. It's interesting to see how the risks were changed since the 2010. Everybody knows about the recent discoveries of the economical risks, about the slowing down of the Chinese economy and the globalization's ideas. But if we will see the 2020 report, you will be talking more about the climatic and ecological risks. If you can see, the dark green color, the natural disasters on this slide, like the extreme weather conditions. And you can see like natural disasters are now looking pretty different than before.
Когда мы говорим про ESG,
if we're talking about ESG, you can see the pattern here that worries everybody. You can see here the customers and society. They are voting and they are choosing the new politicians who are making ways of the living. And we are not the ones who make the standards. The government makes the standards for us to follow.
Это, в общем, понятно. Западное общество, оно потому что немного дальше продвинулось с точки зрения уровня дохода.
And we can see that the Western countries, they are pretty modern on the stage because they're choosing politicians carefully and they know more about the ecological stuff. And
дальше у нас идут товарные рынки.
Next we can see the market, the Brent market.
Но есть и сейчас другие посылы от того же Европейского Союза, который пока еще является нашим крупнейшим торговым партнером, хотя уже
The new trends are also started in the European Union, who is also one of our biggest partners at this moment. And right now, the new initiative will be about the export of our natural resources to the Europe and how the criteria are changing right now and the rules of the exports. And it also followed by the new climatic change risks.
Компании российские, они имеют листинг на зарубежных площадках. И Ян уже об этом упомянула, что объем средств ответственного инвестирования, он сейчас уже очень большой.
The volume of the investments in this course is growing pretty fast, and we cannot ignore this fact. And also the new trend is the banking, who already understand that there are natural risks, ecological environment risks. And like if the new environmental risks are appearing, then we need new ways to work with them. And how we gonna pay back the credits that we already taken.
Подверженности климатическим и экологическим рискам. Вот. И здесь вопрос даже уже не столько в самих банках, да, которые, соответственно, там...
And now it's not the question to the bankers.
В рамках своих регуляторных инициатив, да, обозначить.
Working in their own interest in the initiatives, but in the near future, like the new initiative that they had, they self-checked the banks that are in their own countries, how they gonna work with it, and we're gonna recognize the credit process. But if we're gonna see the whole picture, like if you want to get the money first, if you want to export your stuff on the new market, and if you want some governmental help, also you need to follow the ESG topic. It also includes the corporate governance too.
Экология. Российская Федерация в 2021-2023 году является председателем Арктического совета, поэтому...
Like right now, the main topic of ours is the ecology. Like right now, Russia is the president of the Arctic Council at the moment till 2023.
Ожидать, скорее всего, там с высокой вероятностью и Марпол будет ужесточаться, и, соответственно, полярный кодекс с точки зрения требований к экологии будет ужесточаться.
And the new laws will be more strict. It will be changing in the near future because we're gonna collect new factors. And the risk. So for all the participants of this market, the new rules will be much more strict and they will be full.
Здесь мы должны еще учесть тот факт, что среди стран, которые, соответственно, входят в Совет, там нет, ну, то, что называется, наших, как бы сформулировать, стран, с которыми у нас единый интерес. В основном страны, с которыми у нас, скажем так, есть...
And it will be pretty complicated because all of the countries have their own interests, and each country has its own standards, the new standards, and we need to add more of those challenges. And I want to finish my presentation with this, so thank you for your attention. Your presentation was pretty for the new information of the risk and partners. Yeah, with all of the new trends and topics on the ESG, we're gonna have new problems, and you showed us pretty fully about them.
Все отлично. Ты готов выступить?
Да, если мне
Да, у
дадут
тебя
возможность
вот, коллеги, я хочу
запустить.
предоставить слово Маслобою Владимиру Алексеевичу.
And I want to give a word to Maslaboy Vladimir. He's the head of this scientific head of the Institute of the Problems of Industrial Ecology of Northern Federal Scientific Center. So he knows more about the current problems, and I want to ask him to talk about it and speak about on this thing right now, because we wanted to talk about it long before this.
Видно ли мою презентацию?
Видно.
Видно. Значит, я что хочу сказать, что вообще говоря, последние годы вот это, значит,
In the last few years,
в определениях, она достигла вот с ESG, наверное, своего максимума.
in the last few years, ESG already took on its own took the maximum level of the attention of the participants.
Цели устойчивого развития, 17 целей, их сегодня уже показывали, так? Значит,
It was one of the main topics of the United Nations conferences, and it's the part of the new green economy wave.
Сергея Михайловича Никанорова, да? Значит, он у нас как бы основоположник этой зеленой экономики. Параллельно, значит, есть еще у нас циркулярная
экономика. We have the circular economy.
То, что очень популярно у скандинавов.
And also, which what is also really popular right now in Scandinavian countries, environmental problem.
Проблем промышленной экологии Севера Института Фритьёфа Нансена из Осло оценить, вообще говоря, соотношение всех...
And with our partners from Oslo, we wanted to grade the factor of this problem that we have.
Направления мы здесь спокойно можем говорить в первом случае решение, когда решаются экологические проблемы.
Like with all the three new waves of the new green environmental economy. And if we're going to talk about the social factors that are included in the new concept, we are talking about the corporate social responsibility for the last 50 years. And this corporate social responsibility is got its form formed into license to operate.
Горной промышленности, с местными комьюнити, местными
So,
сообществами, с муниципалитетами. Так?
how the natural resources are collected and with the society that are surrounded by it.
Дальше, да? И вообще, в принципе, вот все это движение, которое сейчас выклинилось в ESG, оно начиналось, вообще-то говоря, вот с Рио-де-Жанейро, будущее, которое мы хотим.
And all the ESG topic that we are hearing about today, it all started in Rio de Janeiro in 2012, when Brazil was calling for building a new strategy of the new green economy, the sustainable development of, of the new wave, and those will be stimulating the new economical growth and on the creation of the new working space.
Значит, ну и вот если посмотреть на факторы ESG,
And if we're gonna see the slide, it has ESG factors.
сочетается с ответственным инвестированием. И здесь мы можем найти вот такой этот самый отсыл к Парижскому соглашению 2015
And
года.
here we can see the Rome agreement that already got
Это не зеленое, да?
the new challenges, like we do not need to invest into oil, and because it's not the way of the green economy.
Как такой комбинированной задачи, да, сочетающие и экологические, и социальные, и управленческие факторы, конечно, много преимуществ.
So the ESG factors that we are talking about today it's real attracting because it has a lot of new benefits, like better production, better grades, it's pretty adaptable, and it, and else.
Российскую, так сказать, действительность, то сейчас вопросами ESG повестки занимается кто угодно.
So right now, if we see on the ESG topic in Russia, some people are really working on it, and one of the first steps that we need to make is the taxonomy. It's an instrument of classification that helps investors and companies to decide if this or other economical activity of the ecological sustainability is it good or not. So we could make the flow of the governmental and private capital on sustainable investment. Taxonomy right now is only in the works right now. For some reason, the Ministry of Ecology is working on it. But there is already taxonomy of the European Union, and also European Bank, and something this also. And one of the first Russian banks that also got on this topic is VTB, whatever. And as a result, the investor is in the loss.
Своим приказом там 541 решила внести свою лепту в государственную поддержку, значит, зеленых проектов, и теперь
the Ministry of Ecology already got the better environmental help, and they are now starting to decide if the project is environmentally friendly or not.
Вот это ESG, это некая такая настройка, да, она сверху, она более
ESG is kind of a preference
движется быстрее, а то, что у нас внизу, а внизу у нас
on
промышленность,
it. So ESG is
в том
kind of
числе вот то, чем мы
on the
занимаемся,
top of the production
промышленность, а ее
graphic, and
так-то
the production itself is on the
да?
bottom.
Поэтому мы продолжаем пользоваться такими понятиями, как зеленая экономика. Я не
We
беру на
continue to use
вооружение,
terminology like
я
the
говорил,
green economy,
зеленая экономика – это как экономическая система, которая должна
like
приводить к улучшению
green economy is an
благополучия
economical
человека,
system
социальной
which
справедливости,
needs to lead to into
естественному
the
букву
successful life of the person
при
and social justice
снижении экологических рисков
with
истощения природных ресурсов,
impactful
а также
downgrade of the ecological
улучшения природной
risks
среды.
and
Посмотрите, на самом деле все то же самое.
uh, not wasting of the
Это
any natural resources.
ESG, которые заложены в определении зеленой экономики, в данном случае это определяла ЮНЕП, ну, ООНовская организация, да? Вот.
And before that, the green economy was ruled by the UNEP, is which was curated by the United Nations.
Существует, особенно в Скандинавии.
And we can see the green growth. The concept of green growth is also was started in the Scandinavian countries, which got a lead not only to economical growth but also uh, the better environment for the nature.
Устойчивое развитие – это вообще слишком общее определение.
And we
Поэтому
can
политика
see that
зеленого роста должна способствовать
sustainable development is too wide of a term, so
политика
the
зеленого
green growth
роста
is
должна создавать значительное улучшение состояния
more
окружающей среды.
into the helping of the
Уже третий год
nature.
работаем в проекте «Зеленый рост российской Арктики».
So we're working in a project that called Green Growth in the Russian Arctic for already 3 years.
Факторы ESG, но я думаю, что мы вполне укладываемся в эти рамки.
And we
Но здесь перечислены те методы, которые
already have new ESG factors that
и Яна говорила, и самое
are
главное,
accepted mostly everywhere.
статистических данных, без него никуда не денешься. Ну и вот очень хорошо вот эта политика зеленого роста
And
отражается
this
на
policy of the new green
проблеме
growth
отходов горно-промышленного
is working
Мурманской области.
good on the wastes of
Здесь уже накоплено 7,5 миллионов тонн отходов горно-промышленного комплекса, вот, которые загрязняют, значит, окружающую среду, нарушают ландшафт,
uh,
ухудшают
the waste of the mining complex of Murmansk Oblast is already helping mostly on it. And as we were showing in before, the economical losses with the saving of the waste, it's already making good changes as a whole on the production level. And also the recycling of the waste of the mining complex, which we call the green growth, also includes in itself the new technology, the market of the mineral resources, and the conscious. And it makes the new space
в Арктике. Но вот если мы посмотрим на
for the new growth of the green growth.
законодательство, оно у нас уже так или иначе вот
And as a law in Russia goes, it's already been written in the federal law of Russian Federation. First of all, is the main principles. It's the health of the nature and the people, the recycling. We need to grow on this factor too. And in the on international level, we already have the global agreement from 2000, also the global initiative with the report by GRI in 2004, and the new international standards in 2008, and also the green finance, which is already in our country, will become a new way of the rating by ESG. As I already said before, we already have two ministries, with Ministry of Ecology and Production and Ministry of Production. Oh, and the main talks are about the governmental financial help in this new way. But I need to disagree with my colleagues who thinks that we somehow gonna track the Western banks into the green economy on the territory of the Russian Federation. I talked to a lot of production companies. They do not think that it's the way of the investment that is good for the Western banks. They will not give us any money. And one of the moving powers into the recycling of the waste of the mining complex. Right now, the market of the mineral resources is pretty stubborn right now. So we don't need any attention on it right now.
Польского научного центра Российской академии наук, которые работают и с предприятиями, и с горной промышленностью и создают такие технологии, как
And we, as a conscious workers of the Kolsky Scientific Center, that we need.
Из них честно признались, что не знают, что такое концепция зеленого роста, знакомы с ней, не знают, что такое ESG платформа.
Like most of the people who work with the mineral resources, they are not familiar with the new green concepts of the world on any level. But you can see like Tornikin is already wants to invest almost 19 billion rubles in the new green way in the new company.
Ты меня слышишь?
Все, заканчиваю.
Сколько времени надо? Да, еще.
Минуту.
Минуту, все, не более.
Минуту. Значит, ну вот здесь я хотел бы сказать, что
Also, I would like to say that I also work on other projects, but that also we look on this environmental factor of the green economy in my other projects too.
Загрязнителей, да, должны разработать так называемые программы повышения экологической эффективности. На их
As we know that the companies of the 300 of the top 300 who are on the level of the waste to the nature, they need to work with the new on a new platform which gonna help modernize environmentally friendly concept that they have in their own company.
Успех политики зеленого роста, читай ESG, значит, в горной промышленности может быть измерен на основании уменьшения загрязнений на местном уровне, значит, социальные последствия внедрения, значит, принципов зеленого роста. Это не только улучшение окружающей среды на местном уровне, но
So
и, скажем, появление новых зеленых рабочих мест и так далее. Спасибо за
mostly it
внимание.
will be helpful into every way of of the companies that are already working.
Хорошо.
And I thank you for your attention.
Коллеги, значит, я сейчас хочу предоставить
Dear colleagues, now I would like to give the floor
коллеге
to another colleague,
Алексей Фадеев.
Mr. Alexey Fadeev.
Он сейчас возглавляет и ассоциацию полярников,
He now heads the Association of Polar Scientists,
и в Институт Петра Великого.
and he is also a researcher at the Institute of Peter the Great. Dear colleagues, good morning. Thank you for inviting and for the opportunity to speak on the ESG transformation in the Arctic. Please upload my presentation.
Сам ее организатором, нет? Только мне, да? Ага, сейчас я попробую тогда им отправить. Ну ты пока говори, я им сейчас отправлю.
I think it's quite difficult to find a more urgent topic today, taking into account that Russia is now chairing the Arctic Council for the nearest 2 years, and the Arctic is indeed a special region for us because 2/3 of our territory is permafrost, and in this respect, of course, to us, the sustainable development and ESG transformation in the Arctic are very important, and they become even more topical in the context of this green agenda that is declared by many states. The need to pay a carbon tax. Mr. Vorotnikov, if it doesn't work with the presentation, then it's fine. So Arctic to us is a special region, and I remember the words of Admiral Makarov, who said that the world's facade faces the Arctic because up to 20% of all of carbohydrates are in the Arctic. I would also like to highlight the risks that are related with such large-scale projects. If we look broader at what is a Northern Sea route and its development, it's a service for the implementation of large-scale industrial and energy projects. Some mining projects. So the prospects of the Northern Sea route, they are connected with the implementation of projects on the coastal shelf. And that is why the agenda that is dictated by the European Union in terms of new sources of energy and this carbon tax, it poses new challenges to Russia because, on the other hand, we have huge resources, and on the other hand, we have to reduce this carbon tax because a lot of industry works on oil and petrochemistry, and they are threatened by this tax. I would like to remind you about 10 minutes. 9 Russian regions are in the Arctic zone today. And if we speak about the exploration of the Arctic coast, then these are new prospects for the energy companies. But the presence of Russia in the Arctic is now new. Today's enterprises that work in the Arctic, they produce some 15% of the gross product. Yana also said about the tasks set about by our president, which put a great load on our enterprises and on the environment. And the operators of the projects and the managers, they face a task of finding a balance between a stable development of the economy and the reduction of emissions and development of social sphere. This is a very important task. Coming back to the carbon tax, yes, we have this problem. It comes from the emission of CO2, which of course impacts the rise of temperature on the planet. But we have to understand that besides this big Arctic zone, we also have a lot of forests, maybe even millions square kilometers of forest, which we call the lungs of our country and our planet. And there is a research that proves that Russian forests can multifold process the emissions of Russian industries. And we understand that they do also process the emissions that are brought from other countries. And we also have to take it into account in our negotiations with the European Union in terms of this carbon tax. And speaking about the principles of ESG, I have to mention of a so-called interbranch or cross-cutting management in the Arctic. We have oil and gas complexes and transport and mining complexes where we mine extract some resources and grow aquaculture. And they have different interests. And we need a regulator, and I think that the state has to be a regulator here that has to secure a well-balanced development of these areas. And we've been dealing with these problems for quite a long time already. In Murmansk, for example. And these principles of maritime territorial planning, they have to be used in other domains as well. So from the flagship, you have to see at the projects that are being implemented in the Arctic zone and how we can implement this governance component of ESG. The process that happen in the nature, how they impact on human activity in such a manner to keep it in balance and in harmony with nature. I should also mention the preservation of harmful emissions. And then when we reduce the emission of harmful emissions, and I think that both options are applicable, we have to reduce the emission of CO2, But it's important for it not to move into some geopolitical field, because the introduction of this carbon tax, I see it as a try of some Western countries to force Russian Federation to use renewable energy sources and to give up our other energy sources. It, of course, creates innovative technologies and new jobs. For example, today at some oil processing plants, there are some CO2 catching devices. And the use of such technologies will allow us to use this resource base and to comply with the principles of the green economy. And coming to the conclusion, I would like to say that indeed Arctic and the Arctic Ocean are a field of interests of several states. At least 6 states are members of the Arctic Council, and more countries are very interested in becoming a near Arctic state, like China, for example, which see Arctic as a special economic zone where they could use their technologies and transportation solutions. And I think that this balanced development has to be provided at a state level. I'm sorry, the presentation is on. Yes, the presentation is on. I'm well, we're very short of time, Alexei. We could see your presentation. Alexei, thank you very much for your presentation and for the facts that you have told us. I'm very glad that you talk about this ESG approach in the Arctic. Now I would like to give the floor to Ksenia Temnikova. So now your presentation will be shared by the organizers. So Ksenia, you have 10 minutes. Thank you. We are a little bit out of time. Dear colleagues, very interesting presentations, and thank you very much for the organizers for such very serious agenda for our roundtable. I would like to focus on an integrated preparation for ESG transformation. We understand everything very well, and we have heard about opinions about the risks and how and what should be done. I'm an expert on ESG strategy. I've been working on it deeply from different points of view, from social and ecological and corporate governance, because I have a relevant working experience. Okay. And in the conditions, you can see the standards that I use as a practitioner. I implement them at large enterprises. These are the enterprises that supply their goods globally.
Хорошо. Поскольку происходит интенсификация повестки дня,
as long as we intensify the ESG agenda, I would like to define the problem, to ask a question, and to offer one of the solutions. And what happens if we don't develop the ESG strategy? As long as I work at the Department of Information Security, I would like to touch upon these issues too. So the problem, a lot has been said that there are now more strict requirements to ecology, and it defines the competitiveness at good markets. And from there, we have to form a system of relations with consumers, the access to signing international contracts is becoming complicated. The idea is that it is necessary to stick to the ESG principles throughout the entire supply chain.
Безопасности всех информационных потоков, которые связывают компанию, которая работает в данном случае в арктической зоне, и ее поставщиков, и потребителей ее продукции и услуг. И кроме этого на товарных рынках еще...
Besides, on the consumer markets, and ESG audit and ESG marketing are now being developed. As for
Можно я сама буду демонстрировать свою презентацию?
Oh, well, please don't show my screen. Also, we have to take into account that when we use the factors of ESG, when we make investment decisions, international capital rings, the responsible investing, it now makes over 100 trillion US dollars. Another large segment is working with stock exchange, investor relations, and stock exchange relations and bank relations is another segment of ESG banking. This is a different presentation. Here we have to pay attention that the entire system of relations will change, and the companies are not ready for this competitive environment, and they cannot get access to funding. They need to conduct some preparatory work. They have to conduct ESG sessions, taking into account the external and internal stakeholders, where they have to develop their policies and identify their key risks and the indicators that influence its future indicators and the future cost and its positive image. For example, Warsaw Stock Exchange has announced a competition of ESG leaders. So these are the companies that offer goods that provide positive impact on the environment. I think that we could use it for the Arctic as well. This competition is meant for the companies that work with the ESG policies. So if there is such need, I'm ready to step by step take the companies through the principles of the ESG and to show the primary 6 steps where you have to choose the product, the ecosystem of the product, then identify the ESG properties, then to see whether they comply with the international standards within the region and within the enterprise, then to develop some internal documents that would also be the documents of the Arctic region. Here, it is very important to train the staff. As an auditor, I can confirm that, and everybody in the enterprise has to be aware about what is ESG, what he or she has to do in their position, and what happens if he or she doesn't do anything about ESG. Speaking about the rankings, we have to develop a roadmap to improve the rankings of the company in this ESG ranking. And it is a continuous work to improve the ranking position, because on that depends the signing of contracts and the access to funding. Then ESG reporting. And this ESG reporting, they fit the financial reporting, the then corporate social responsibility reporting. So they are some sort of part of non-financial reporting. That is why this data, they have to be smart. Because this data needs to be processed during a short period of time, and the company may just fail to do it. So only smart data can be used here, and the ESG parameters that are chosen by the enterprise. So the control of ESG parameters has to be provided at all levels of the enterprise, because the V lanes now that would like to penetrate into the IT security of the company. So if together with the ESG, the company risks to lose not only its competitiveness, but also the image, because there can be some information links and some unauthentic reporting. I'm ready to conduct this ESG session in practice. It has to be involving stakeholders, top managers, and members of the board of directors. So such session would include some 40 to 60 people, and it has to involve the entire personnel, because any staff of the company has to very well know the ESG policies of the company. Then briefly about some international standards that could be practically useful for the Arctic. Many people know about the international standards ICO 14001, environmental management systems, but there are more standards. But as a practical person, I can say that if you read carefully about what ESG includes, it also has corruption combating, so anti-bribery management systems. There is also a standard of compliance management systems, a guidance on social responsibility, and another one, energy management. And there is another series of standards. These are the standards that have to do, it's like a series of standards of information safety. On the next slide. So information technology, and then business continuity management systems, and then risk management. The best practices are moving ahead, and it is most important to comply with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Я бы хотела остановиться на взаимосвязи.
I would like to talk about the interconnection between the ESG and business continuity. We have to pay attention to the fact that it was declared at the first session of the Council on Well-being and Sustainable Development of Yakutia. It was declared that the quality of life is completely related with the interaction of state and business. So how can we secure the continuity of business? We understand that natural disasters and technological catastrophes, they are risks that can be realized. So the continuity of business has to be treated in such a manner that ESG can either kill a company or to make it a successful company. ESG can even make them leaders, because there are not only risks, but there are also ESG opportunities. And you see that the strategies of planning business continuity, they are directly connected with ESG. And we can see what main indicators will be in the focus of attention of companies if they have to secure the continuity of their business. Because the continuity may be interrupted due to various reasons. And here I have to say that conducting the audit of continuity of business of enterprises working in the Arctic is much cheaper than liquidating than the consequences of all these disasters. So please feel free to address me, because I am a practical person. This methodological foundation is needed to include the ESG agenda in the real activities of the enterprise, and we will get the best practices, the use of standards of new generation. And they will comply with the requirements of the investors or the stock exchanges, or, well, most likely the investors. Another two things that I would like to highlight is the program of training that I provisionally call ESG strategy. As long as it is important that ESG agenda is understood by the entire staff of the enterprise, especially for top managers. So it will be different in terms of time frame. And if you're interested, again, please, you can address me. And there are 3 types of programs for 16 hours, 40 hours, and 72 hours. It can be both online or offline. What happens if we don't develop ESG strategy? So let's answer this question together. First, the company will lose the trust of its business partners. ESG strategy and digitalization of management and the collection of data for quick management decisions have to be accompanied by the automation of system of control of ESG parameters, then the competitors will do it. And they will find funds and people for that. And the company will not be able to confirm its leadership, and it will face some difficulties. And it will not be able to sign the contracts or to get some long-term funding and investment. Then secondly, the company will face some in-company problems and contradictions. If this is not done, then the internal problems and contradictions will decline and reduce its economic efficiency. Then systematic problems that influence the compliance with the ESG parameters, the companies have to now think about how to develop the this corporate direction, how the supervisory board will work, and whether it will be a driver of the ESG agenda. And please have a closer look at what is the cost of the mistake. And another moment that has to do with corporate governance. We mentioned that at large enterprises, they implement digitalization programs. But then there comes the problem of information security. So it is important, it's crucially important for the Arctic zone not to allow some outside management algorithms here. So information security has to be on the top of the agenda. And if you look at the cases of some foreign companies that have been implemented, then the information security there is at a very high level. And finally, the fourth step is there will be a gap between high qualified specialists in digitalization and information security, automation of production, and the general low level of information of the specialists. And so this gap of qualification of the personnel will grow because you cannot rely only on some top managers. We have already mentioned that all personnel has to be aware of the ESG approach. Everybody in the team have to understand how they influence the image of the company. And the positions in the ESG rankings, they cannot be not only reached, not only achieved, but we also have to think about the fact that digital reporting on ESG indicators is implemented actively. And I would offer to conduct an online ESG session. You have my contacts on the slide. I will be glad for cooperation. Thank you very much for raising such serious issues. Thank you.
Готова ответить на вопросы.
Спасибо, Ксения, за ваше выступление. Да, вот очень хорошо, очень конкретно, очень правильно. Мы потом дальше обсудим продолжение всей этой темы, что мы дальше можем сделать по этому вопросу. Коллеги, спасибо вам.
Да.
У меня, значит, хочу предупредить всех, да, у нас как бы сессия, где я уже переговорил с организаторами, в 11 не закончится, то есть у меня все, кто записаны, все, кто здесь есть, все выступят. Я вот сейчас хотел предоставить слово Марии
I
Мазуриной.
want to give a word
Да, я вас слышу.
Вот.
to Maria Mazurina.
Мария Мазурина вообще занимается устойчивым развитием в Норникеле. Именно та компания,
She's
которая
the head of the Department of Methodology and
занимается устойчивым развитием. Мы как раз работаем на том
in
рынке,
the
который
sustainable development of
к
Nornickel.
переходу, и который очень чувствительный к трансуглеродному налогу. То есть вот компания вообще вот находится в самом эпицентре и экологических проблем, да, Мария?
Her company is most of the time is in the center of the main problems of this mining company.
Александр, спасибо большое за приглашение и возможность выступить. Уважаемые коллеги, слушатели, добрый день. Я буду очень рада возможности поделиться с вами опытом
I'll be really glad to share our experience of Nornickel about the situation in Arctic. So our experience that I'm going to talk about today
правильно для себя определяли приоритеты, основываясь на...
it's about the priorities of the companies. Like Alexander said, we're in the center of the ESG topic in Russia, not only because we're located in the Arctic zone, and not because we're the biggest company, but because our main market is Europe. And as you know, Europe is one of the driving forces of ESG topic in the world.
Мы находимся в России и подчиняемся требованиям в основном российского законодательства, да, для нас...
And even though we're located in Russia and we follow the Russian rules, we also very influenced by our European partners. So we are really at the center of the ESG topic today, and we're working on ahead.
Наш ключевой
And our key
на Таймыре сосредоточено около 2 миллиардов тонн руды с точки зрения или на Таймыре 72% совокупного производства меди и 42% совокупного производства металлопромышленной группы компании. То есть для нас Арктика – это ключевой регион деятельности компании.
And the Antarctic zone is one of the main regions of our production. And because we're one of the biggest company, we need to face the...
Целью компании Норильский никель является, безусловно, формирование ответственной модели формирования...
One of the main goals of our company is the responsible production in the and to be careful with nature.
Мы сформировали 18 стратегических целей на перспективу до 2030 года.
Already have 18 main goals that we need to make to the 2030. And on each project we almost gonna invest about $6 billion USD.
440 миллиардов рублей. Мы поддерживаем повестку устойчивого развития.
We support the topic of the ESG, but we got our own priorities also.
Мы фокусируемся на цели номер 3 – хорошее здоровье и благополучие, на цели 11 – устойчивые города, населенные пункты, на цели...
One of the main goals is, of course, is the health of the people. It's the rule number 3, and the rule number 11 is about the bigger cities.
Будут затронуты приоритеты, да, с точки зрения тех, которые мы реализуем в Арктике. Охрана окружающей среды, да, базируется на том, что компания желает минимизировать негативное
And
воздействие.
our company is trying to minimize the negative impact that is impacted the nature as a whole. And also, we need to take better care of our production as well.
Может быть, опыт пребывания в городе, что сейчас Норильск не может похвастаться хорошей статистикой в области.
And as you probably know that Norilsk City has a big problem of the pollution and the quality of the air and ecology as a whole. And Norilsk City has a big problem with it. And with that, our company can stand on the side with this problem. We have different programs for it.
Заводе и на медном заводе. Общий объем инвестиций в эту программу оценивается порядка...
And we have environmental programs that we are investing about $4 billion USD. And with this project, our main goals are that the waste in the pollution air will be reduced by 45%. But in the further future, we trying to reach the cut by the 90%, which will be the unprecedented situation, the unprecedented achievement for our company on a global level.
Логистики, да, на рынке поэтому уделяет особое внимание планированию проектов по принципу экономики замкнутого цикла, который позволяет нам минимизировать затраты на реализацию наших инициатив. В частности, да, мы рассматриваем...
As the logistics goes, we are also working on new systems.
Строительство мощностей по переработке отработанных
And
шин.
also we're trying to improve on the power of
крошки, да, которые возможно использовать в
production of the materials for constructions most of the time.
Также создавать технические регламенты и стандарты, которые бы позволяли отдельную часть наших минеральных отходов также использовать там, в строительстве, в муниципальном заказе.
Standard goes, we want to try to make our waste to be to recycle them into some other materials for itself. And we want to keep our high percentage of recycling because we think it's important. And the level of this should not be lower than 30%.
Мы ориентируемся на то, чтобы размещать 100% наших отходов по новым добычным проектам, да, с использованием технологий, которые минимизируют воздействие на окружающую среду. То есть тех технологий, которые у нас есть в справочнике наилучших доступных технологий. В текущем году мы запустили масштабную программу.
This year we started a new program called Clean Norilsk. And this program is targeting the cleaning of the city. In April, we started this program, and at this moment, we deconstructed dangerous building and collected a lot of garbage, dangerous waste. And this program is going to work for 10 years.
Опять-таки, в силу географической локации в Арктике минимизировать воздействие на уязвимую экосистему Арктики. Мы понимаем, что мы не можем добывать, да, какими-то там варварскими методами и, безусловно, должны обращать внимание на рекультивацию земель, на вопросы сохранения биоразнообразия. Да,
we also working on in risk about saving the
что мы будем рекультивировать порядка 117
about the
гектаров.
recultivation of the 117 hectares a year.
Что касается программ поддержки и сохранения биоразнообразия, то
What about the saving the
горно-металлургического совета по металлам, в который мы желаем вступить, да, мы запускаем фоновое исследование вместе с научным сообществом.
We also working on the research about the
Как мы считаем, может помочь компании сформировать адекватную позицию в части управления рисками в области биоразнообразия на основе понимания ее исходного статуса.
we're also researching biodiversity because we're trying to save as much as we trying. And as you know, our company is one of the few ones that have clear databases, and we working with 14 other scientific centers, and we are researching the pollution, the atmosphere, and we hope these researchers will start the new concept of the production in Arctic zone.
Одной из важнейших целей устойчивого
развития. As Alexander said, one of the main reasons why we doing all of this, and not only for our company, but also for all of the other companies. The theme of the climate change. First of all is, of course, the global warming, and we have goals to reduce the speed of the growing of this global warming.
Годом 2017, да, если мы говорим об интенсивности выбросов, да, то здесь мы тоже ставим для себя амбициозную цель по удержанию в нижнем квартале мировой кривой Вуд Маккинзи, да, по интенсивности выбросов парниковых газов для глобальной горно-металлургической отрасли. Да. Вторая призма, да, это, соответственно, управление физическими рисками. В части физических рисков для нас драйвером изживать цели устойчивой ответственности перед местными сообществами, которые живут в регионах, да, подверженным рискам, связанных с таянием вечной мерзлоты.
Здесь мероприятия, которые мы предпринимаем,
maybe harmful for them. Мы пытаемся интегрировать рекомендации TCFD в нашу методологию оценки рисков. Мы хотим базировать нашу оценку рисков физических и переходных в связи с изменением климата на основе вот той методологии, которую нам предлагает TCFD.
And we're trying to follow the standards of the CCED about the waste and pollution, all the harmful stuff, and the climate change too. And with this theme of the climate change, we need to pay attention on problem as a whole, because it's one of the main problems of the companies in the Arctic zone. So we can make the risk management much more efficient. So we need more clear data, and we need more abilities to use our technology to control in some way the climate change.
В Арктике, безусловно,
Arctic.
Несмотря на, может быть, какие-то алгоритмы несовершенные по анализу данных, тем не менее позволяют компании более качественно, да, подходить к оценке рисков. Вместе с тем мы запускаем также наш флагманский проект, связанный со спутниковым мониторингом зданий и сооружений. Это такой уникальный проект. В проект вовлечено много подрядчиков. Мы их собирали по крупицам. Тем не менее, проект запускаем.
Мария, в дальнейшем хотели, чтобы закончить?
1 минуту, да.
Okay.
Планируем развивать предиктивные,
которые
позволят не реактивно управлять риском, а управлять риском предиктивно. Мы считаем, что этот опыт, безусловно,
trying to predict mostly of the problem, not and we're trying to involve this practice into our work, and we're targeting on
с учетом специфики Арктики на поддержку коренных малочисленных народов Севера, да,
on the indigenous people of this north. As we had the agreement with the Association of the Indigenous People on Taimyr, and our agreement says
безусловно, будем способствовать тому, чтобы
we will be helping the people of the native people will have a lot of social benefits that can now include in the regions.
Сколько это у нас с тобой сотрудничество длится? Очень замечательно. У тебя вообще текстовый файл есть, того, что ты говорила, нет? Или это
я смогу его накидать. У меня есть какие-то.
Все, давай, накидай, да, и мне перешли потом, ладно? Ты знаешь, да? Вот, для чего мне это надо? Так, коллеги, вот значит...
Александр, я оставлю с той мыслью, да, что я действительно поддерживаю мысль Яна о том, что системе управления...
And I really support the idea about the paying attention of the criteria of efficiency.
К этому требованию, да, чтобы у компании были четкие ориентиры в отношении того, как вот управление должно...
Know how companies...
Не только технологии, не только там регулятивная среда определяет успех в ESG-повестке, но также никогда не нужно забывать про кадры. Да? Вот кадры решают многое, нам нужны профессиональные кадры.
We really need to think about the personnel because the personnel should be more qualified. We need to work with the local. Right now, Maria, I have...
Отлично. Вы пришлите предложение, мы действительно с кадрами посмотрим.
Да, хорошо, я отправлю их на практику третий курс.
Конечно. Спасибо большое.
Они как раз хотят на устойчивое развитие, всех сейчас на эту тему, на ESG-трансформацию.
А вот нам бы криологов еще, климатологов.
Ну, это уже не к нам, это госметеорология. У меня управление исключительно. Так, Илья, вот я к тебе обращаюсь. Ты можешь потерпеть 5 минут?
Хорошо, терплю, да.
Потерпи, пожалуйста, я очень тебя прошу, да, вот. Просто есть еще вот, у нас здесь присутствует Игорь, вы меня слышите? Игорь?
Да, я вас слышу, здравствуйте.
Отлично. Вот Игорь у нас тоже спешит. Вообще вот Игорь, это очень серьезный человек для тех, кто занимается арктическим.
Right now we have our next speaker is Уров Игорь.
Вы знаете, что это такое, и поэтому у меня есть два предложения. Первое. Игорь, вы хотите сказать, вы немного слышали, у вас есть вот что-то сказать?
Игорь, what would you like to say to the participants? And this, we really hope for the questions for Igor because he's in a hurry.
Он выбрал себе 20 минут, чтобы побыть с нами.
Ну, спасибо большое. Я просто...
Thank you very much. I would like to hear some questions from you because I can talk about on this topic for a while. And if you have any question which I can currently answer. So, dear colleagues, if you have questions to Igor.
Но я очень благодарен тому, что ты пришел и нашел время с нами связаться. Поэтому я что предлагаю? Мы в ближайшее время, вот я представляю экспертный центр ПАРА, и мы для артистов...
We are presenting Expertise Center Pora, and
у нас есть такой инструмент, как дискуссионный клуб.
We have the discussion club as a project, and we always inviting people who want to speak on these stimulants, and you'll get a lot of questions in there. So we can work together. About, we can work about the location of the waste and CO2. we can call it some other names. If we need to change the law or not.
Потому что
And
закачивать СО2 надо там же, где будут, собственно говоря, его
производить. Где произвели,
там,
там
не
и
производить,
закачать.
это неправильное слово. Производить водород, значит, а соответственно СО2 это там отход производства.
yeah, and we need to minimize the waste of CO2 at the almost after the production of it. We can call it as a subproduct because if we call it waste, some different laws are coming in action. But if we call it a subproduct, it will be different thing. We need to minimize it at the production level, and it's an Arctic zone as a mainly. And as I said before, firstly is to understand what is the quality of the reservoirs, how they are kept inside. So the lids will not be will be held. Lid will be keeping the CO2 really safely.
Жидкость, так ее назовем, значит, не смогла проникнуть.
As a liquid, so liquid would not be able to leak inside the lid, and we need to make sure that the quality of them lids should be higher and be asked for should be and as a thing we need the reservoir of CO2. I can show you an example. Like right now in the world today, in PHG, if we turning it into liquid, then we're gonna have 44,000 million tons of liquid. And in 2050 year, we're gonna have 4 billion. So as we gonna make the reservoirs to keep the waste inside, will be much higher, and we need much more requirements and have more research as the chemical and biological way. So, and the second thing that is important, we need to research about the mining spaces and how we're gonna underground, and it's a really big production. And when we talk about the energy, we can call it as a really big strategy. So right now with Rosneft, we had the agreement about the reservoirs, which ones we are gonna use it, and the second one too.
Огромное спасибо, Игорь. Вот тему подняли вы очень серьезную, ее надо, конечно, должно быть дальнейшее развитие, да, потому что вот она у вас в виде идеи, в других там странах уже начинают закачивать, да, там и получают карбонат.
The topic of it is really important because
Ну, не согласен. То есть во всем мире эта проблема стоит точно так же, как у нас.
in the world as a whole, this problem is really important. So we need to expand the theory of this problem for a lot. So we're gonna talk later. And colleagues, if you have any questions for Igor, and he'll be leaving now. So thank you very much, Igor.
Теперь мы хоть друг на друга посмотрели и знаем, что нам дальше делать. Спасибо огромное.
Спасибо.
Спасибо.
До свидания.
До свидания. Так, теперь у нас Илья. Ой, Илья.
Okay, now Ilya. I would like to give the floor to Ilya Stepanov, the representative of science. He's deputy head of lab of Higher School of Economics, and he is also a student of Igor Makarov. So, Ilya, the floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Vorotnikov, for your introduction. I will try to be brief. I wanted to discuss the topic that has been risen about the climatic and the transformational risks. We said that the seriousness of problems of permafrost, weather, wildfires, another threat for our regions and enterprises is the reaction, the response of the global economy and this low carbon transformations that happen in all branches of the world economy. 60 countries have declared that they plan to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. It is very important that, especially in the well-developed countries, this is not just some policy, it's a mainstream of the general economic policy, which is integrated into long-term development goals and including in the social problems, which can be noted at the EU levels. I wanted to say that quite often we somehow exaggerate the macroeconomic consequences of trans-border regulations of European Union, and we cannot fully discuss the consequences. But if we look at the integrated models of general balance, for Russia, they are not that great. Of course, in different branches, they are different. Of course, I'm not saying that it is not dangerous. Yes, it bears some threats, but what is more important is to have a more integrated approach to the change of financial and technological change of green economy and the dependence of Russia on fossil fuels. So I think that a more tangible risk here is the decrease of export of carbohydrates and the decrease of budget and corporate income, which is like more serious than in this trans-border carbon regulation. These are some different macroeconomic effects, and the opportunities of adaptation to this new reality, they are related to a number of scientific policy of emission reduction in the countries where they depend on natural resources as an instrument of softening these long-term risks. For example, in Sakhalin also they aim to reach, to achieve this carbon neutrality. There are general 64 initiatives in the world, and it is understood that they are used not in a very resourceful countries. And this carbon price is a sort of challenge for Russia. But anyway, some 10 or 15 out of 60 systems, they are in place in rich countries, for example, in Canada or Australia, that export natural resources that can be compared with Russia. And here there is a number of practices that can be used And they indicate that the opportunities of carbon price, they depend on the architecture of carbon regulation and how to take into account the effects. And in many countries which might be relevant for Russia, there is an attempt of this fiscal neutral maneuver when they replace some energy taxes or corporate taxes. So this is a sort of win-win solution. And offset projects that also allow to decrease the emission expenses. Also, I wanted to mention that, of course, it doesn't mean full to give up fully fossil fuel. This is just an integrated step of developing petrochemistry, but it is important not only from the point of view of ensuring from future risks, but in particular for creating and implementing new possibilities that are abundant in Russia. And we have not discussed it today, but these opportunities, if you don't go too deep by the sectors, I'm sure that my colleagues from metallurgy or gas production can speak in more detail. But on the whole, from the point of view of policies, and in my specialization as a carbon price, we can say that this is a sort of first step to create a demand for the implementation of large-scale climatic projects in Russia, and then the integration of Russia and Russian and financial markets into global carbon markets. In Russia, it is cheaper to decrease the emissions at the expense of energy efficiency and agriculture. And we have already had such a case implemented in the first period of the Kyoto Protocol with some different regulations and conditions. But anyway, these practices, they can be upscaled, and the legislation is moving here. And thank you very much for this speech and presentation. Everything was great. You have shared a very good idea. Thank you very much. I'm afraid to make you late to some other session, so good luck. Now we have listened to Ilya, and now I would like to give the floor to another expert of Para, is Mr. Sergey Nicanorf. He represents Moscow State University. He is a professor of the Department of Economy of Nature Use. Thank you, Mr. Vorotnikov, for having me. I will be brief without presentation. I'm writing articles about this, and we are now producing a journal, and we'll see. I wanted to highlight some stops because something that I have heard from the previous speakers. Vladimir, are you still here? Yes, I can hear you. So thank you for still being here. I wanted to note that in addition to green economy, there is another important element as blue economy. So for the Arctic, I think we have to establish our own system because Not all elements of green economy work in the Arctic area of Russia and not only Russia. So ESG criteria are very well integrated into blue economy, which is mostly social. Another element that I heard in Ilya's presentation, he also spoke in my session in Yakutsk. I wanted to highlight that we have to go not only from downwards, but also from upwards. Because Vladimir mentioned in his presentation that we do a lot, sustainable development goals, statistics. Since 1997, we moved from Kyoto Protocol to Paris Agreement in 2015. And now we're developing a strategy of long-term development of Russia with a low emission of greenhouse gases. But these documents, they have certain threats and risks and all these different scenarios like basic, intensive, and some other two elements that remain unchanged. One scenario remains unchanged, and then there is even one scenario without state support, only business, like in our national project Ecology. But it is not clear where our business will be able to pay for all of that. I think that this element should also be considered not only in terms of key risks, but also we have to develop certain indicators that have to be developed. Why are we developing this criteria? For some doubtful investors, I'm also quite skeptical here, because investors can be different. So what kind of this investor is? Is it a portfolio or strategic? Is it an investor from China or from the Asia Pacific or a European, etc.? So I think that we should have a very global look, and before developing some ESG for a company, we have to develop and approve a low carbon strategy for each region of the Arctic zone. And to see at least until 2050. Another moment that I would like to speak about is the aspects related to projects. Yes, we can do some projects, but look at the projects that we do. We speak about some shares, about listings, about our public joint stock companies to rotate in the international stock exchanges. But if we speak about green bonds, I think that green bonds are more interesting and more profitable for our Russian companies and for the economy of the region and the entire country. So who is the leader of these green bonds? Is the renewable energy sources and environmentally friendly transport. I think that there is some way of broadening this approach. So our basic scenario says that we have 1.5% of renewable energy sources. I think that this is a very small percentage for such a large country as Russia. If we look at the ESG bonds, then there is a leap from 2019 If you compare it to 2020, then the volume of ESG bonds has doubled, because in 2019 they made $350 million, and in 2020 it was $700 million. But now everything has changed, and the share of social bonds has risen and equaled to the share of green bonds. So this is the focus of bonds in Russia. Actually, our companies should transfer to ESG strategies. It is impossible to live without them, and the representative of Nornickel told us about it. But it seems to me that here we need an integrated approach to this issue. Otherwise, it will be just the way it was. The strategy of socio-economic development are on their own, and the development goals are on their own. And in general, my own opinion, even if our companies suddenly show that they achieve by 2050 a carbon neutrality through either projects or decrease of emissions, in my opinion, the market, the European market, we will lose in under any scenario, for political factors and for clearly uh, economic factors. If you look at the strategic development of the European Union, by 2035, they plan to give up petrol and diesel engines and carbohydrates at all. So they move to some renewable energy sources. So it seems to me that the system here, we have to understand why and for whom we need this ESG criteria. So
Вот сразу спасибо, Александр Михайлович, Сергей Михайлович, за ваше выступление.
thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to add, we understand who is to blame, but what should be done? I think that now Gazprom strategically, together with the government, do a great activity. They now will gasify all buildings with the funds of Gazprom. It means the broadening of domestic market, and the strengthening of domestic market strengthens the positions of corporations in the outer market. So I think that the mechanisms of this green funding of ESG should be focused on the domestic market. Then, yes, I totally agree with you. What they are doing in the gas sphere, our companies and the public opinion should force our companies to implement it. But we are now forced to it by our Western partners and Western investors. Unfortunately, this is the entire pool of those who force us to do it. Unfortunately, the public and what we work in science for, we have to make our public to understand and to force the business to improve the living standards, which is very important. Why do I say that social projects are now like equal to the green projects? That's because the ESG projects have reached them for just 1 year. You said a very interesting phrase about the green bonds, but if we talk about Moscow Stock Exchange, there are no green bonds in Moscow Stock Exchange. And these corporate bonds, for example, Russian railroads, they also don't have green bonds. Only waste management now work with green bonds. There are now some regional green bonds in different projects, and also some other regions, they now issue green bonds, and what you call it as like social bonds. You mean this impact bonds? It is understandable why they occupy such a great share, and they are financed by some financial structure. That is why they occupy a huge part of the market, because all these risks are borne by a private investor. This is obvious. Bank, for example, now work in such projects like education, medicine, and something else. Yes, I agree, Alexander. You are an expert. You have worked in this area for many years, but why I told about it is that almost 2.5 trillion rubles have been allocated to business, not to the state. Well, I think we should discuss it somewhere else. So thank you very much.
Вы у нас практически, ну, как бы крайний, не последний, а крайний.
К тому же
Only speaker will be
Спасибо за приглашение.
Gleb Zaznov.
Честно говоря, тяжело выступать после стольки, так сказать, докладов, которые...
It's really hard to have my presentation after all of the speakers, because they truly explained all the modern topics, all the actual topics. So let me tell you about something that hasn't been mentioned today.
Как появилась ESG трансформация, так сказать, из...
How did ESG transformation actually came up, and why do we need it? And ESG transformation
частных инвесторов мелких, которые свою...
It came out after the private investors who came out with the opinion.
Крупные инвестиционные фонды. Понятно, что это западная тенденция, не наша, так сказать,
And we can actually see that this is a Western tendency. And we need to, they wanted to get the confidence up in the eyes of the investors. We remember how bigger companies, they didn't get their risks seriously, and that's why they were wasting money on the investor after the disaster. And it's mostly on a opinion based on people who live around the biggest company. And there were also when the government also dropped the help drop the help to the companies, and it mostly like all the three factors who also to also make the global Western investor do better. When I started to research this topic, I had the complete sense of deja vu with SNK. Yeah, at the same
по многие, так сказать, компании, особенно государственные.
At the time where there was, it was really hard to get into the to get without the certificate. It was needed, and this certificate was actually like currency. And right now, ESG uh, is not a failure like in perspective, because it has the basis on the risk management, but even in simple form, but still have it. Like the market of the small investors.
В нашем же случае я бы
And in our own experience, I wouldn't drop it, because we could use it as an instrument if we took it seriously.
Бизнес, в том числе на
As some instrument of pressure to the business to keep saving the interest of the people and government in the Arctic. Because if you need to support people on the top, if the business will understand that there will not only be the fines and the lack of the finance, no tax reductions, so that we can work really greatly and seriously, especially in the Arctic zone, where we can get a lot of natural resource production. I would like to say some words about the ESG transformation. Like for me, it's obvious that it'll be the change of the management only after the risk check for all the participants of it. And in big organization, it's called risk management. So the responsibility the companies have, they will be answered by it. It should have also zero tolerance to all the dangers. And only if we're gonna have a lot of practice experience to get rid of the problems that mostly they will have.
Своевременно будут срабатывать процедуры, которые будут просто отклонять рискованные решения. В связи с этим так сильно убегу вперед по поводу того, что делать. Значит, было сказано несколько...
So it was said before, speakers before me told about the risk, that the risk management is solely based on data, and they should be fresh, and there should be a lot of. So in the Arctic, if you want to manage some risks, good quality, you cannot be leaning. You cannot be leaning on the big personnel, like the climatic model. It'll be pretty expensive even for the big companies. So if we can take it and use it as it's supposed to be. Or it should be some government customer, just to work with this model in the farther future. So collect the data. I cannot agree with Yana because that we don't have enough. We cannot make up the data. We can work with. We can get a lot of data, even though even we have institutes that work with it.
Я здесь не буду заниматься, так сказать, рекламой соответствующих институтов Российской Академии Наук, которые этим занимаются, но желающие могут, так сказать, мне написать в личку, я скажу.
So if some people want to have questions about it, they can write to me. But why do we need ESG transformation will lead to will lead to a lot of risk management problems and in the management as a whole, and what will like in the further future, it will be bad for the in the eyes of the investors. Like the models that companies can get, if they will not be enough, and government should take on itself like creation of a digital platform to collect the data and work with it. And of course, it should have also some artificial intelligence attached to it. So it could also give some recommendations after it. And it can be worked with it. What the other question? What kind of investor? ESG concept also was born just to make the investor feel better, and inside the company, they are carefully choosing the correct way. They about the businessmen in the Arctic zone who are working right now there. It was also mentioned they are needed there with the inclusion of the risk management. We would work there or not, because there are a lot of risks. People there are located in harsh conditions. And I'm coming back to the second question that was mentioned. I think
Два слова.
Нам то, да, все, 1 минута. Надо же,
Да,
ты как-то все вокруг около и не по делу. Давайте, продолжайте.
Так сказать, я
Вопрос
считаю,
поставлен?
что все-таки социальная
So I think like the social part of the Arctic is we didn't come there just because, but we need to fulfill the requirements of the society and of the energy. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Правильное реагирование. Уважаемые коллеги, ну вот, наконец-то мы, организаторы нас попросили, хотя и продлили нам время, предложили нам все-таки завершить это мероприятие.
So yeah, the organizers said we need to finish our discussion. We really glad that and thanking the organizers of this event because they prolonged this one, and I am really glad that this that all these speakers had something to say and shared their experience. And I wanted to say we can continue this thing on our platform Pora. We already started this thing, so we talked about it already for half a year. Secondly, about the ESG transformation, it's pretty obvious what they wanted to say. It's necessary. There was a lot of complaints about it, like the ESG transformation is not a theory, it's a practice. And the main reason for it is just to show that the company can take care of the nature. If they want, then you should not give money to them. And it depends on all the investors because all of them will be looking at it. If you need transformation, you need the new technologies to realize the transformation. It can be all of the venture type of stuff. And we need the will of the government. So we need more laws that can handle this situation. And if we won't have it, then it won't be possible. Because here in Russia, we have projects that are really feeling the will be really have backbone of the Western countries just to say something to Russia. One of the main factors. So on this note, I would like to say goodbye. Thank all of you. I am really glad. It was really nice. It was really interesting, and it's cool that all of us have same interests.
От этой нашей деятельности. Всем спасибо. До
So
свидания.
thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Сергей Михайлович, вам очень благодарен.
Да, спасибо.